Hello, welcome everyone. And I'm very excited today. We're going to have a very interesting and fun conversation with Jenn Baljko. And the idea here is to create applied astrology and how to move with the cycles of the earth and the sky in a very practical manner. So we are going to talk about how to reinvent ourselves with creativity. And Jen is a writing mentor and mindfulness coach, and she has done walking from Barcelona to Bangkok. So
Bangkok to Barcelona.
Bangkok to
Either way.
Barcelona, yes. And so we have a lot of interconnections in that sense because I used to live in Thailand. And so we are going to talk about that, the reinvention of ourselves with creativity. So I would love to start with why creativity is so important for you.
Thanks, Mar. Thanks for having me too. This is
Yes.
a topic that, I could probably spend my lifetime talking about. Is the truth in this. Why does creativity matter? I didn't always know that to be true, I think. And I think now that I've hit 50, and even before, like even coming into this pandemic, I really understood that creativity was going to be my engine because I had already reinvented myself a lot of times in my life, and we can talk a little bit about that. And I never really got to the point of where I understood what was fueling it. But I think in many ways, in particularly in the pandemic times, and in particularly in this moment, I want to come back to my essence of joy. I want to cultivate my joy. And the way that I need to do that is to use creativity as a way to translate the message that my spirit wants to say. And I start there, but it's taken me a long time to understand that because I spent a lot of my life, in my early life, leaving behind sort of my creative energy to pursue my career, right? To kind of have this more linear motion in my life that yes, I was going to go to university, I was going to get a career, I was going to graduate and have this job, and then I was going to do all these other, you're going to have the family, the husband, the kid, the wife, all this other stuff, like all of these things. And then I went for this long walk across 2 continents, and I realized I don't need any of that anymore. And what I need is to re reestablish the way I measure my life. And joy is my measuring stick now. So what I started to understand is that I wanted, I went right during the pandemic, I started to go deeper into meditation, and I became a mindfulness meditation mentor. And then I wanted to reconnect to my body. So I learned how to teach the Femme movement experience, where we move through different emotions and like how they're stuck and held in your body and heal that. And what I started to realize is that, oh, I need to add my spirit piece to this, and it wants to talk to me through my hands. And that's how I started to reconnect to my own creative superpower, just in that way,
Mm.
really gradually and slowly. And now it's something I can't go back and forget, you know?
And I love how in your work the word joy is very important. And it's amazing that we're doing this today. Like is Jupiter in Aries, that is like the courage of going forward, something that you only can do, right? Like each of us have something that only us can do it. And then in Leo, that is shining from the heart, that we have the sun there, and there is this beautiful trining and then all this energy of revolution with the North Node and all of this in Taurus in the earth. So how do you think we can bring joy in personal ways with creativity, and then also how that really creates a change? Like we both feel that the creativity is the key for bringing the change into the world, right? So how do you see that change coming?
Well, and I have to say that I have very strong Capricorn footprint. I have Sun, Moon, and Mercury in Capricorn, but I'm also rising Aquarius with Venus in Aquarius and my North Node in Aquarius. And then I have this strong Sagittarius fire element, right? So I'm kind of, my journey has been a combination of all of those things, right? Like I still like practical, pragmatic, climb the mountain kind of Capricorn grounded energy, but I also like know that I can't fit this way. Like I need to elbow my way out of this structure that I've created and that society holds me to. But then my like higher Sagittarius also in my 11th house, for those of you who are following this, and I'm still learning all this stuff, but I I'm a natural explorer, right? I'm collecting wisdom. I'm out in the world to experience the world, but to also bring it into like my own hermit space of like this, you know, we're walking this fool's path and then bringing it out into the world. So my creative journey is grounded in some practical things that I've come to learn recently again. So one of the things, I'll just give these practical tips here, but then I want to, you know, talk a little bit about the reinvention, because I think the reinvention part is like the big picture thing. Okay, let's start there because I'm actually
Yes,
feeling like
yes, yes,
let's
yes.
talk about the
And I
big
think it's
picture thing
perfect
first
for the
and then the
energies of today.
practical things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to just show you a funny thing that I remembered that I made. I made this back in 2015. It's a word collage. And I have all these words like for growth and boldly go into the world and testing and stretching the limits of what's possible. And right before our walk in 2016, when we were leaving to go from, my partner and I went from Bangkok to Barcelona by foot. It took 3.5 years. Huge reinvention process. Like, but also not, like also very intuitively ours to do in the world, and we said yes to it. So the other day, a couple weeks ago, my brother asked me for some photos that he knew I had, and I pulled out my old photo albums, and this fell out. And my mind and my eyes fell exactly into this tiny little corner where it's the awesome power of focus, you're not alone, dream. But somewhere in 2015, I found this very, very tiny little phrase, creativity is the key to reinventing. And in these last few weeks, like it must be like all of this energy that's out there too, like my eyes just landed in there and I'm like, this is the absolute truth. And it was this tiny little corner of my life in 2015 that's now become the absolute center of my life. Because how do you create a joy journey? Like I am on a 30-year joy journey. Like I want from my 50s until I die, whenever that's going to be, 30, you know, if it's 30 years, if it's 40, if it's 20, like it doesn't matter. But I have this vision that I'm meant to live with joy. And this needs to be the essence that I want to work with in the world. This is the essence that I've ignored in me a lot and earlier in my life because I had to be this serious career woman. You know, how is anybody going to take you seriously if you were lit up with joy, right? And I was also very cynical. I was a young journalist. I was very cynical and I didn't believe people. I didn't believe in things that they were telling me, and I felt very righteous about what I knew to be right, right? So now I'm coming into this different phase where joy is what I'm navigating towards, and I want that to be my compass point. And that's not to say that there's no place for anger and grief and rage and sorrow and sadness and fear. There's a place for all of that. But I don't want those things to be my story. I want my story to start pointing towards joy. So the way that creativity then fits for me in that picture is that I have to invent this, right? How many people do you know have a joy journey and they're measuring their life against joy, right? There's very, like the Dalai Lama, you know, but he's, you know, this enlightened being who has already come into this wisdom. But how do the rest of us know this? So I had to return to like, what gives me great joy? Sketching, drawing, doodling. And that's how I've incorporated it. It's just I put my creative practice before anything else I do in the morning. That's how, so to get it down to like the practical thing, because if I'm also a marathon runner, and I know that for me, it's never about getting to the finish line of the marathon. It's about getting to the start line of the marathon, of the official race day. And I know that I've already put all this training in to get to the start line. So I feel like I've I'm doing all the training. I'm already at the start line, but I'm still doing all the training to get to sort of the 30 end goal. So my day-to-day practice is I wake up. I've now, my very first thing is I walk around my house and I water my plants because I feel like I connect with this little bit of nature that's in my life. I nurture that. And then I do a movement practice. Sometimes it's just a few sun salutations or a dance, like I put on some music and I just dance around my living room. This is actually my creative space, it's my movement space, and it's my meditation space. So I've blended them all together and I don't have that separated anymore. So I get my body a chance to speak to me, and then I do a few minutes of meditation. I might pull some cards or oracle cards or something just to have like a key phrase or key energy that I'm focusing on today. And then I sit for a few minutes in meditation. And then I pull out this giant Tupperware bucket that I keep under my desk now. And I just say, okay, today is a marker day or crayon day. And I just allow myself to play with whatever's there, whatever feels like it wants to come through. And that's it. And then I get on my day and I go have some breakfast. And then sometimes I have breakfast first before I do that, but it just depends on the day. But then I go about my day and then I schedule everything else for everybody else. But not having that, when I don't do that practice, I feel less whole. And having this practice, it feels like now it stretches all of my muscles in the way that feels good in my mind, body, heart, and spirit. And that's how I've made it like a very practical thing in my day. And I don't do it every day. Like sometimes on the weekends we decide to go start the day early and do something else. But I always feel like even if I do it at night for a few minutes as well, like it's always present now, and I don't need to ignore it. I don't need to be this serious, person out in the world to be validated in the work that I do. And yeah, I think it's been coming back to this idea that creativity is the key to reinvention allows me to have the idea that I'm always reinventing myself and I'm not stuck in one place ever. I don't know.
Yes,
I
yes,
think
yes.
I'm rambling now,
Many people,
Mar.
many people have felt that way, right? Like stuck in a place, and then we were talking before recording of like how do we live like in boxes, and how like being professional means being serious. All these things, in a way, they need to be changed in the collective, because being professional, for me, is that you love your job more than anything else. That is a professional person, because if you love your love with all your heart, you're going to put your heart into it.
Right,
And then of course you make money, but your goal and your compass is not just for making money. And
right,
most of us work is like a slavery in a way, because you do it in order to get paid, and then you get into a cycle. And creativity is the key to reinvent that cycle and say, no, I really want to dedicate my time to something that makes me feel satisfied and joyful and alive. And creativity in that way. And I was thinking, like, for sure people maybe can listen and then say, I don't have the time. And that is
yes,
one of the things that we always
right,
say, right? I don't have the money, I don't have the time.
right.
And that is very important to be creatively changed as well, right? Like, how do we
Absolutely.
tell ourselves a different story, right? In that sense. So how do you think creativity can help us to find the time, find the money, to really rearrange our life and our priorities?
It's a good question, Mara. And I think this is where I've also had to start over again from this concept, because my idea of professional was not that I loved my job. It was that I showed up every day and I gave my best effort to somebody else's project. I was a freelance writer for a long time, so a lot of my projects came from other people who had deadlines and wanted certain things, and I could gauge the value of that based on how much time I spent and how much quality and effort I put into it. So there was a price for these kinds of projects. I don't really know now how to value and put a price on joy. You know, like what I'm hoping to teach and show people and guide people towards, like, I don't know what that value is, because I think many people don't quite yet understand that they're in a reinvention process. And I think we're always individually in a reinvention process, and people love to stay in their comfort zone, right? This is what I know. This is what I've done all my life. Like, I've struggled a little bit with like the ikigai. Like, if you guys have seen the ikigai, where you have all these overlaying circles where you get down to this like center point of focus of your life, and you know what you've been paid for, you know what message you want to bring out to the world, you know what you want to share. And I'm still kind of figuring that out. But I know that what I got paid for in life was professional and good quality. It did not always give me joy or satisfaction, right? So this idea of having not enough time and not enough time and not enough money to do it, I think our biggest teacher right now is going to be whatever we are living through these last 3 years. I believe that we have always been individually in reinvention. Like, and these reinventions come in big ways or small ways, like you get a new job, you get a divorce, you choose to move somewhere, right? All of these like walk you on the edge of something, and then you have to take the next turn. You have to take the next step. And the pandemic right now is giving all of us collectively a moment to turn together. And we want to go back to normal. Yet there was no normal. And that normal that you thought you had isn't normal. It wasn't. Or if it was normal, like, it's not where you are at this moment in time. And it needs to bend and change and move. So the time factor, and I think many people are knowing this now, they are waking up and saying, I just worked for 2.5 years in my house. I don't need to go back to an office. Why can't I just do what I'm doing here? Why do I have to live in this big city and spend thousands and thousands of dollars of rent when I could go live in next to nature and work remotely, right? The work system is changing. Our value of time is changing, right? We are allowed now to go back out into the world and travel, but are you doing exactly what you did in 2019? Probably not. Is there more caution? Maybe. But it's sort of, go out and do all those things that you did in 2018 and 2019, and you're going to come back, and I think you're going to still see there's something else. There's something else that's more meaningful to you now. So the time and the money, I don't know exactly. I think it comes back down to, how are you going to live your one precious life, right? The Mary Oliver question of, where are you going to put your values? Are you going to do that thing that's on your bucket list? Are you going to say yes to life's invitation at this moment and see where it takes you, whether it's a direct highway to your next goal or a scenic route to something else? And creativity is like the vehicle to this. It's not there's not an end goal when you attach creativity to things. You can have a vision of where you're going, but you still have to invent how you get from where you are now to where you think you're going. And you get a chance to value this every single day. And it doesn't, okay, if you want to be a painter, an artist, you are going to have to take the time and the energy and the space to create this. But if you're looking just to make small creativity leaps, like Natalie Nixon writes about in The Creativity Leap, if you want to just begin to turn the creativity engine, I mean, how long does it take you to doodle on a piece of paper while you're listening to a song? 2 minutes, right? Like, could 2 minutes be enough? And I say 2 minutes because when I trained for my first marathon, way back in 2002, 2002, I think it was, 2001. I did it with the team in training group in San Francisco that raises money for lymphoma and leukemia. And we had a young woman who had leukemia come in and talk about her experience. And she said that the doctor who treated her would come in and say, can you do the chemo for 2-minute increments? Can you do, like, I'm going to come in and check on you every like 2 minutes. Can you do it for 2 minutes? And she said, I could do anything for 2 minutes. And that has always stayed with me. So the doctor came in and said, how about 2 more minutes? How about 2 more minutes? How about 2 more minutes? So that has stuck with me for years and years of like, you could start living the life that you really want in 2-minute increments. And they all add up. They all add up. And in writing, for instance, like there's always this wisdom of just put a timer on. This is what you do for like an hour or 2 hours, and then you step away from it, right? So you could get into flow for an hour and 90 minutes, but there's always this idea of stepping away from it. It's not going to be an every moment practice, but you could change your life in 2-minute increments.
Yes, and everyone has 2 minutes, right?
Right. Like just think of the time you waste like just trying to load your computer, like or scrolling. And I'm not saying Facebook and social media aren't useful tools. They're useful, but they
We
do
waste
take
a lot of time with them.
yeah, they take
Many
you
times.
out of your own like hermit space where you need a little bit of this energy, like where you seal yourself off from the world for a little while to just okay, this is what I'm going to do for 2 minutes, right? Like and it doesn't have to be structured. It doesn't have to be planned. And it doesn't have, I make things all the time and then I throw them away. Like I don't have to have any attachment to it, right? Like it's not the purpose to have attachment to it. So.
And I think that's very important because the thing with creativity for me is a human right, is something that we are born to be.
That's right.
Every single person. But we have connected creativity only with people who are like professional, and we again have the word professional here, artist. So it's like if you are not a professional artist, if you are not a writer, a dancer, a painter, then you are not creative. But that doesn't make any sense because you are teaching something, you need to be creative. If you are cooking, you need to be creative. If you are an entrepreneur, you need to be
You
super creative.
super creative.
So
Right.
like, please, let's change this because that is also what we need to be teaching in schools. For me, I've been in a educational system for like 20 years, and it's the opposite of what we're doing. We are putting young adults, I work in university and high school, into boxes. And what we need to be doing with them is completely the opposite. It's like, you have this problem, solve it, be creative. And then that's the skill they will need in the future.
That's right.
Not memorizing data that is already obsolete. So for me, this conversation of putting small pieces of creativity into your life is really big. It's like it's the key of reinventing society as well. So that the reinvention is personal, but it's also collective. It's like, how do we make things in a different way? So I think that is very important.
Well, and it's so fascinating that, there's all this wisdom around like returning to doing what you loved when you were a kid. And I kind of always just brushed it off as like buzzwords and yeah, like go back to your inner child and embrace your inner child. And I say it sort of mockingly, but it has actually turned out to be very true for me in my rediscovery, like in my own reinvention. And what I've noticed in the last handful of years is that, and I say the last handful of years is because I'm making a dedicated effort to understand this, right? Like how and where I kind of stopped, not that I stopped using my creativity, but that I stopped being aware that I was being creative, right? Like I think this is it. I want to be aware that I'm being creative. And this is energy that really fires me up. It is the creative life force in me is what has gotten me all through my life. And I haven't fully acknowledged it until now. So this idea when we were kids, like we used to have art classes And they were like relegated to like Friday afternoon at like 1 o'clock before the bell rang. Some art teacher would come in, and when there was no money for the art teacher, like the teacher would just invent something, and it just usually involved scissors and glue and putting something on the page.
Colors.
Right? Like it wasn't. Sometimes they were guided, and sometimes they were just sort of like, okay, it's a holiday, so make your Thanksgiving turkey with your fingers or something. Like all this. And I used to love this until about seventh grade, until I was about like 10 to 11, 12. Because then it was like, oh, it's Friday afternoon, like the bell's gonna ring, we're gonna be out free for the weekend. And definitely after like 11 or 12 years old, like the focus for me became you have to get good grades, you have to go to university, you have to study math and sciences. Like I was part of that generation where there was still not a lot of women in science and math, and there was still this sort of focus of bringing more women into that field. So, and I love that. I'm a life learner, so I have loved learning all of these different things. But somewhere around that time, 11, 12, is when I know I did not have active art sessions. Like that was not part of my teen years at all, like sitting down and just drawing on a page. And that's something that I had done for a lot of my younger life. And then but what I did notice is that all through my life, whenever I'm listening intently to something, especially at meetings or conferences, I used to just have I would leave a column on my notebook and I would start just doodling. And I remembered that this is me listening intently, that I'm listening very intently, but I'm also letting my hands kinetically connect to something, right? So the memory of that has now made it like, again, something that we kind of lose in the digital era because we're always on our phones. So we're not writing notes the way we used to, right? So one of the practices that I've put into place just recently, in fact, a few weeks ago, is to write a day journal at night, just before I go to sleep. And I don't write it with emotion. I write just factual, like what happened today. And then I have a gratitude and I have a question. And I try to make it not a big question. I'm like, you know, what is that new bird singing downstairs, below my bedroom window? Like I kind of make it small questions so that my mind has something to think about while I go to sleep without the big issues of life. And then what I've done is I've started to, every day I make a sigil, but that's my doodling. It's mindful doodling. So I make a statement of intention, and then I use those consonants, I'm sorry, I use the letters, not the vowels, to create just a symbol. And then I cross out the intention, I cross out that word, and then I'm just left with this little mindful doodle that is the impression of my day. And I've gone back and I've looked, I'm like, I don't even remember what the intention was here, but I have the little symbol that has some vibration in it that carries me forward, right? So it's a lot, I think it's a process of remembering more than having to start over. I think it's just getting back to the basics, like just getting back to the basics. Like what can you do today? What's one thing that you love to do that you can give yourself 5 minutes to do? Right? Yeah. It's problem solving, but it's also just space. It's just holding space for that, and saying that you are your most important invention.
And it's so connected because in many things that you said, I could see the feminine one like over and over, right? Like when you want to go to from A to B, the masculine way is just going into a straight line and that's it. And the feminine way is to say, okay, let's see, oh, this flower, and there are bees here. Let's follow the bees. Let's see where they take us. And both paths are very important, and it doesn't matter if we are men or women, right? Like we both need those ways. Like sometimes we need to just go into the point and go fast, and sometimes we need that seeing route that you were saying before. And the creativity, I think, is taking the other road, and there is the magic of where it's going to take us. We don't really know, because maybe you were going to be, but you end up going to see that it was the place that your soul really wanted to be, not be, right? So yeah, I think there is this opening up, and there, how do you think fear relate to all of this? Because I think sometimes real creativity, like there, it's not to say that there is like the doodling that is important, but when you really create something that is like a book about your life, or a painting that is really expressing something very deep inside of you, normally there is this fear of being exposed. So what do you think that creativity is doing in all of this?
Well, I want to just hop on one thing you said first about the masculine and the feminine, because I think it's so important, and it's something that I've learned in my own expression, is that I have had a very masculine way of being in the world. I have an Aries. I have my Mars and Aries in my third house. Yeah, so it's like I'm very like, this is very go forward motion for me. And I've had to learn to come back into this more feminine flow. But I think always, like, where I'm going with it is I just want wholeness. You know, like, I want wholeness. I want to take the scenic route, and sometimes I want to just really focus and get get shit done. Like, I want to get stuff done, right? Like, so I'm finding the balance of this, and I've been doing a lot of this work in the last few years and really unifying this expression in me. And I've even like, I have like, oh, this is my boss lady feminine, this is my like fun masculine, who's saying, all right, let's just kind of like I have him pictured as like the Mario brothers, like Mario, that he's just hopping around doing his thing, collecting coins, and then moving on, right? So I've been very playful with how I invite the feminine and masculine divine expressions back into my life, because I want wholeness more than one expression or another. So going back to the fear, and I have noticed in my own life that I tend to be, I have fear. Like, I have a great fear of being paralyzed. That's one of my greatest fears. Like, I have a fear that I'm going to fall down a cliff and I'm not going to die, and I'm going to be paralyzed forever. And that fear like paralyzes me. My fear of paralyzation like paralyzes me. It has physically many times, like on a hike where I felt like I've been in a dangerous moment and I have a panic attack and I can't get to like the next, and it's like a path that has like 2 steps. It involves 2 steps, and I'm struggling to take the next step. And in that moment, I've asked for help physically, like, and emotionally. Like, Luis was there, my partner was there, and I said, I cannot make this next step alone. Can you come back and help me? And he like sits me down on the rock. Like, this happened when on our long walk, I had this moment, and I'm like, I can't take one step forward. And he's like, sit down, take a breath. And then together, like, he's like, just look this way, put your foot here, put your foot here. And then I got over. But it was an hour of paralyzation that I could not move, right? So fear is a very real thing, and it can happen. In most of my life, though, I've been fearless. I'm not afraid to change, and I'm not afraid to take the next step. And I think part of this is because I have a very strong way of listening to my intuition and the wind that comes to me. My own way of hearing what's mine to do comes usually in an audible way. And as soon as I hear the invitation, I know if it's a yes that I say yes to, right? Like, I kind of know it. There's a deeper knowing. But fear shows up in a lot of creepy ways, right? Like, for me, the fear of not having enough and living in scarcity is something I am struggling with, right? Like, how do I do my joy and make money from it is a question that's come up a lot for me this year. And what I'm realizing is that I've put myself into a box where, again, I'm like, and this is my constant push and pull, like, my success and my prosperity, money is one little tiny piece of this. Like, my good health, my self-expression, my ability to work in groups and alone, like, this is a bigger measure of my success than how much money I have in the bank account. So for me, it's just constantly recalibrating. Like, yes, I'm a little nervous about this, or I'm not sure of the outcome, and I'm afraid of what could be, but I'm still going to do it. I'm going to do it anyway. And if I like like reinventing this whole, like leaving behind my journalism and freelance writing life to move into mindful mentoring, to move into leading movement classes, to making creativity the center of my life, I can't I can't go back to what I did. I just, it doesn't fit me anymore. And I have only to, I use the word trust, but I think it's not, I think it's something other than trust. And it's more than acceptance. It's more than that. Like it's, I have a path and I am going with my machete knife. And where it's not cleared out, I'm going to cut the path. And I'm going to get tired and I'm going to have to rest. But I'm going to get to the clearing where I see that more clearly. Like I'm going to get to the place where I know that I have to just kind of walk across the field and keep going. And yeah, I have a little bit of that Artemis, you know, like the goddess of the hunt. Like I'm just going to do it. And there is a lot of doubt, right? Like because I still have this idea of, what do I do? Like, I don't know how to answer that question. Like, what do I do in life? I am doing Jenn. That's what I'm doing. And if I come to being Jenn with fear, then I won't shine. And that's probably the most basic thing. If you want to do you in life, you have to choose what doing you looks like and then do it, right? And be it. Like, it is this idea that we're always doing things. Like, I think it's important. You do have to take the next step. You do. And that's a physical action that you usually have to take. It's an emotional leap that you have to make. And if it's a story that you're telling, if something happened to you when you were 4 years old and you're still afraid of that, then I suggest talking to somebody about that. You know, going to a therapist, because that is not the story that's going to be useful. It might be. Like, you might find great success in retelling that story 100 different ways to Sunday. But do you believe that story anymore? And when that story begins to turn and change and you're in the moment of turning, you gotta let the momentum move you, I think. And I don't know. See, I
Yes.
can talk forever about this,
Yes,
Mara.
yeah,
If you
no,
don't stop me, I'll just keep talking.
it's so inspiring that part, because I think many of us, especially women, are in that space of, okay, I know that I don't want to do work wise in this case, right? Like I know I don't want to do what I used to do. And even I was successful and I was really there, right? But that's not working. And I know I want to do more, right? And you want to do yang, and we don't want to be in boxes anymore. It's like we were talking before recording, we both write. And with writing, there is always this idea of what genre do you write about? And I'm like, I don't want to put my artistic endeavors into boxes. They have life. They are beings, right? When you create a book, it's a living being that it has the right to be its own unique thing, right? It doesn't have to fit into boxes. And the same with how do we make money? How do we make a living doing what really we were meant to do? And I think we are all in that process of like, let's create this together, right? Let's be creative because it's new. We haven't done it before, or we did long time ago. So then it's like that remembering of how can we tap into something that wants to be born through you. So there is this faith as well that you are just doing what you, I don't know, and listening to the wind, as you said, right? So I think that is very inspiring for everyone, because in a way or another, we are all there. I think even people who think they like their job, there is always like this missing piece. And it's very easy to feel when someone is truly dedicating their time to something that they love and they are passionate about. It's clear, right? So it's like, for me, creativity is the key to that, is the key to empower people to really tap into their potential and to really do what they were meant to be doing, right? And then the joy comes
Totally.
there. So I think it's really important. Like, this conversation is really important. And how do you see the connection between mindfulness and writing, for instance? How does it help?
I will I often don't know, but I'll come back because I do
Yes.
know. Like I do know, I just never really fully expressed it. But one thing I do want to just clarify is that I know that there might be many parents in the room, you know, like listening to this, and that you are doing jobs that you have to do because you are providing for family, you know, like this is your biggest work, is to make sure your family is safe and provided for, and that you may not feel like you have these choices. And I have these conversations with women, particularly women, all the time, and women in their 40s and 50s who have parents that they're taking care of, and children who are still getting through high school and saving for college, and all of this stress that comes with that. I just want to acknowledge for one moment that I think parents are the most creative people on the planet because the constant amount of things that you have to deal with that's getting thrown with you in any given moment, you're constantly inventing everything, right? So if you just take a moment and step back and say, wow, this is like my creative life force coming in play to like take care of this little circle of family that I have so that they can go out and be great in the world, or be their best humans. Like, please don't cast aside what we're talking about here as, you know, for only people who you know, we all have life responsibilities. We all have a certain amount of things that we want and have to pay for in life, but that's not separate from your creative superpower. Like, that's just part of it, and it's how you're going to funnel that energy to do that. So, and I think this is where the mindfulness comes in. And I've been meditating for a long time as a practitioner and never really got it. You know, like sit on the cushion and like trying to stop your thoughts, that's not the key. The key is to just become the observer in your life, right? And to give yourself this space to kind of train your mental muscles to move in different directions. You're always going to be thinking. So the mindfulness, going deeper into mindfulness as a facilitator of meditation now, and learning a little bit more of the constructs behind the mindfulness and the meditation, had me realize that mindfulness and writing go together. Because if you want to tell, and there have been many times in my life that I've unmindfully approached my articles or stories. Like, I was on deadline, I had to get this information, get it out, you know, as fast as possible. But the personal essays that I write, I want to come to this with strength and stamina, focus, creativity. And what I do before I begin my writing practice is I sit down and I do a few minutes of meditation, because I want to be able to direct my focus into my most impeccable words, right? Like I want to be able to use this vehicle of speech and communication through my writing to convey something that is meaningful to me and hopefully will have a ripple to others. And I do that now, even like with my marketing stuff or with my newsletters. I know that, and it doesn't always work, because sometimes I want to say too much, and I need to kind of, you know how to use the accordion skill of writing, where you stretch a story out and where you contract it and bring it back to be more concise. But writing as a creative practice, or writing with intention, when you start from a moment of mindfulness, I feel you can go deeper, and that you can begin to remove the layers of fear or doubt or shame or guilt that might cloud a story. Because then you can see it with a little bit of objectivity and say, this is what happened, this is the fact of the story. And then you can decide how deep you want to explore your emotional base with it. Without, writing does bring up a lot of trauma. It could bring up a lot of memories of very stressful moments in life. But often the only way forward is through it. So when you can start from a moment of intention and say, let's see what's going to happen today, and I'm just going to put the words on paper as they come to me, then when you kind of circle back and maybe do the edit, you can say, I want these words to be the most impeccable words because it meant something to me, and I believe it's going to have meaning for somebody else. Right? I think it's just a connection. Mindfulness becomes the connection to you, to your inner world and your outer world.
And many times it is important for us and meaningful for us, is going to be meaningful for someone else as well, right? So there is this trusting in it needs to be written and send it, and then someone else will appreciate that, because yeah, it's
Hopefully.
magic, hopefully. And if not, just
If
for
not,
us to get it out of the system is
right.
so healing. Like writing, I think, and any creative endeavor is for me is really the way to heal. So even the stories when you were saying about like if something happened to you when you were 4 years old, for me the way to really heal the stories is to do something with that.
Right.
Create a painting, to create something that you say, this is out of my system. It has, yeah, transmuted the energy. If not, we keep going around the
We
same
go
thing
around, and it's the
forever.
story.
And
It really, we all have stories, and we have beautiful stories to share. We often latch on to the stories that put us into a victim moment, and there's something to be said about that. And I will acknowledge Dr. Scott Mills. He does really amazing work about sort of rewiring stories. He has a focus sort of on prosperity evolve. That's a course that he's going to be teaching in the fall that I've signed up for. But it's over the last few years. I'm sure I know how I came to be with him. He he showed up as a mentor because I was reading the book Happy Money by Ken Honda, and I was doing a Mind Valley class, and he does some really very interesting like meditative journeys, or they're not even meditative journeys. I don't know what they are, but they give you like quick tools that you can start rewiring the stories in your head. And then you leave like this 15-minute session and you're like, oh, is that really the story I've been telling myself? Is that like, wow, I didn't even realize that was the story I was telling myself, right? So um, there are people who are doing amazing work out there with this kind of rewriting your story. But that's one of the people who've come into my life recently who've helped me understand. And he just did a 6-day challenge, so I have now like these new tools. And he's specifically in this session with the money and the prosperity idea, but it's really about life, right? Like we did an exercise the other day about being in a hallway and like everything you want is behind the door at the end of the hallway. And like, how do you get to the end of the hallway, right? Like, and I won't give you the whole technique, but because you probably, it's better if he does it, because but I did find like in that moment, like I couldn't get to the door, like it felt unreachable. And then he embedded a bunch of different techniques, and then suddenly after that, and the next time I was in the hallway going to the door, I could get there and I could start opening the door, right? So you there is an effort. Like life happens and life flows, but there is an effort that you also need to consciously, subconsciously, and unconsciously make, that you are going to be active in changing your story. Because when you start changing your story, and when you give, I believe, when you start giving yourself space to notice the story, to tell the story in whatever way it comes out, and then to choose something more fulfilling with like your hands getting into it as the vehicle to change that story, I think gradually over time you start realizing that. I think this is an important moment. Like July for me, July particularly, I've had this very strong feeling like I want to spend a lot of July looking back over what happened these last 2 or 3 years. Like, what did I really learn?
Learned.
Like, and then I even did it more, like from the beginning of my walk in 2016 to 2022, this 6 or 7 year process. Like, what have I learned in 7 years? What have I learned in the last 6 months? And being really conscious of that. And then saying, I have a 21-month plan. Like, I was beginning to feel too ungrounded. Like, I'm doing all these things and I don't have a vision. So I'm like, I'm going to come together with a 21-month plan, which for me feels like 2 years feels like a little like, oh, I don't know if I could see 2 or 5 years, but 21 months, like 21 months takes me to March of 2024. Like March of 2024, I feel like I could put good structured steps in so that I have a vision, and then I can come back and say, I'm creating in flow towards this vision, right? Like I still have a goal. I'm a little bit attached to this outcome because I do want to achieve this personally and professionally. But I'm going to take the steps, and within these steps, I have a lot of room to decide what is the next step, what is the creative vision, what is the focused, concentrated effort, right? Like I've, and this is me again coming back to wholeness. Like, so creativity is one part of my wholeness, and then using that as a tool to create my vision as I go through my own next phase of reinvention, right?
Yes. And if someone that is listening to us want to connect with you and be part of what you are offering with joy and all these creative endeavors and mindfulness, how can they, what is it that you're offering next? And what are you doing right now? And how
Sure.
can they connect? We'll have the details below the video, but also like anything that you want to say
Yeah,
about
the best way to find me right now is on alwaysonmyway.com. That's the main website. I'll give you my email too, because I do believe in very personal networking as well, and email is still the way that I connect. It's Jenn, Jenn, at alwaysonmyway.com. And I am setting up my fall 2020 program is going to include mindful writing mentoring, but I'm doing it a little differently than I've done it in the past. I'm adding a few different things. I'll be having a more formal announcement about that at the end of August, beginning of September. And I'm going to do I have some one-off classes that are based in movement and meditation and creative flow coming up, but I'm also hoping to create a longer-term program where we work with complementary opposite emotions. So where we kind of work with anger and then joy, and then sadness and happiness, right? Like where there's this complementary, or despair and delight, like where there will be a movement practice, there'll be a meditation practice, and then there will be some I'm not sure exactly how it will go, but there might be a creativity practice around it as well, because I feel like some of our creative expression has to also come with dealing with our emotional quotient, our EQ. Like we can't disconnect our emotional state of being from our physical and spiritual state of being. Like there has to be wholeness in all of it. So that's what I'm working on.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure but and thank you for like bringing more creative energy into the world. For me, it's like just always.
Thank
We
you. Well,
do
you too, Mar. Like,
that. Yes,
hands up to you too. Like, let's go do this.
yes, we can do it, right? Like just enjoy the process. Let's enjoy the process wherever it is and create and give birth to magical beings. And yeah, so thank you for your work, for being here.
Thank you, Mar, for inviting me.
It's been a pleasure. And also like it's really connected to the energies of the moment. So we are also planting seeds for the future.
Right,
And
right.
it's also always very important. I feel that as an astrologer, something that I'm feeling more and more is that every decision that we make, every conversation, like even us meeting today, is planting a seed for future, right? So sometimes we want just short term rewards.
Right.
And sometimes the reward maybe is coming like 10 years along the way, right? Like maybe
My
we're,
rewards are planned for 10 years out. Yeah.
yes. So it's very important to be conscious of that sometimes what we are planting and businesses, we were talking before recording, that
Yeah.
sometimes it takes 3 years to really launch a business. So being aware of those timings, right? That things in life sometimes time. So let's enjoy the process.
Let's enjoy the process. And while we're planting the seeds for the future, like, you still have to tend to your garden now, right? Like, you could use creativity. I've been saying very much like from the end of June to like the middle of August is my tending garden period where I'm doing like my admin task but I'm trying to approach it with this, yeah, look what I get to do today. You know, I get to tend my garden. I get to like look at the things that I haven't really, that don't need my attention anymore and they could be kind of taken out so that I can nourish the things that I'm really growing towards. So planting and tending, like it's a constant complementary opposite, you know, to that. And harvesting, you
And
know,
harvesting, yes, and everything is happening
appreciating
at
that.
the same time normally, right?
Right.
Like,
Right. Like this patch of garden over here is harvesting and this one's just being planted and this one needs some love and care. It just, you know, it's just how we all have to move right now.
yeah.
So thank you, Mar,
Thank
so
you so
much.
much.
So
Thank
much.
you.